Welcome to the Family Banking Show with your hosts Rob, Derek, and John, where we dive into the world of the infinite banking concept and discuss personal banking strategies to secure your legacy and build generational wealth. We're glad you're here, and we hope this episode serves you well.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Family Banking Show. We're your hosts, Derek, Rob, and John. In this show, we talk about infinite banking, family banking, and legacy planning. Gentlemen, how's it going this week?
Hey, what's going on, Derek? It's been a great week. Tonight is game one of the Western Conference Finals. We're all Minneapolis based, and man, we're excited to see those Timberwolves take it to Dallas. I grew up in San Antonio, so I've never really liked the Dallas Mavericks, so I'm pretty excited to watch that game.
Yeah, for sure. Rob, how's it going?
Good. I was out mowing the lawn today. We had 3 inches of rain yesterday.
My whole house shook from the thunder and lightning.
Yeah, it was pretty intense. Lawn looks great. Took a long time though. That's heavy grass, man. It was not filling up my bagger. So some really good, exciting home lawn care tips here.
Nice. Well, guys, in this episode, we're going to be talking about Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. We're in part 1 of the book, and we're going to be harping on the banking function. Let's just cue it off here. Guys, what is the banking function? And then we'll get into a little bit more details here.
The banking function. He talks about it in page 11. That's what page we're on. And he talks about this one pool of money. And the banking function is how that pool flows, right? It flows from you to me to merchant A, merchant B, bank A, bank B. It is constantly flowing. And that's the nature of how money works, and how the banking function operates is through the flow of money. And this page just kind of talks about that flow. And it's a really, really interesting perspective on the flow of money and how it relates to our own little banking system.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, Nelson talks about banking being the most important business in the world. Any ideas as to why that might be, and what sort of insights our listeners can learn from that truth of banking being the most important business?
I think, what Nelson was talking about there is that in order for anything to happen, or any action to happen between two parties, any progress, let's even say, there has to be some transfer of funds, of money, today especially. So, the banks are the place where the money's held, right? So if you want to get something done, you have to exchange money for service, money for time. And that money is in banks, and you have to go to the bank to get it so that you can then, exchange it for something. And so I think that's the key point there, is the banking system is in the middle of all of those transactions. So everything flows into the banks. And so that's why it's that central figure in the play as we're living life and exchanging, getting goods and services.
Yeah, every business, every consumer needs the bank to perform that transaction between two parties, right? It's necessary, especially in our day and age, and it's really unpractical for people if they aren't tied to some form of the banking system to even just think about how you're going to live your life. I mean, yes, you could potentially barter for everything that you need in life. It's just really unpractical, and people in today's world just don't really seem interested in that for the rest of their life, to live in that way. So banking is important. It is the most important business because of the fact that every business, every consumer is dependent upon the bank to do those transactions. Nelson says that it is the essence of what this is the essence of what a banking business is all about. Someone or some organization has control of that pool of money, and it can and must flow at a cost to meet some need. Now, John, you already alluded to this a little bit, that there's only one pool of money, one pool of capital. Talk a little bit more about who are the different people in the play. What are the different institutions or organizations in that pool of capital?
Yeah, he continues on that next paragraph down on page 11 on the left side, that this pool, the fact that it's managed by any of these institutions, banks, insurance companies, corporations, individuals. He even says in various countries. I just got out of the Navy last year, and getting to go to many different countries in the Eastern Asian side of the world is pretty interesting, seeing all the currencies. And I never related it to really the US dollar in the same way that Nelson does, in the way that it's all just one pool. Like, I just kind of considered it as a part of their economy. I was in Japan for a while, for example, and um, I didn't consider their currency really in any way impacting mine. And obviously there's a bit of naivety there, but there is just one pool and it all has to flow. And those different actors or institutions, like you talked about, Derek, all just have a hand, in that pool and a part to play to continue the flow. So a bank, one big thought I was having is, banks store money and banks lend money. And I always thought, when I'm thinking about storing my money, that it should just stay there. But the banks don't allow that. The banks are not just going to keep it there and have a little earmarked envelope for you. Like you might, say some people budget with, envelopes for one different category at a time. And banks aren't going to do that for you. They're going to lend it out. They're going to continue to have it flow. And say they lend it out to customer B is going to deposit it in that bank. And guess what? They're not going to let that store. And then continue on and on as long or as much as they can to turn the most profit. So if they're going to give you interest for storing, say, 4%, and then lend it out for 6%, a 2% spread seems pretty good. But if they turn that, 5, 10, even 15 times, that spread continues to multiply. It's that multiplier velocity of that money is how the banks are profiting off of many of our savings and checkings, just kind of sitting in a bank, not necessarily sitting in the bank, though.
Isn't it interesting, though, that banks even charge you if you pay off a loan early? Oftentimes you get those prepayment penalties, right? That's just another way that they can just, recycle that cash as quickly as possible. They, in some ways, it seems like they don't want you to pay off the loan early, right? Because they know that they'll keep you as a customer longer, keep paying interest to the bank. But at the same time, we know that they're most profitable when they're able to churn through those loans as quickly as possible, recycle that cash flow. Yeah, I mean, Nelson talks about the concept of just think about all the water in the world. It might be in streams, it might be in rivers, lakes, the ocean. He says it doesn't matter. It's all connected in some capacity. And that this water flows, as rainfall, as Rob was talking, 3 inches of rainfall flows into the ground, then into our lakes, rivers, out to the oceans, whatever. He says that doesn't matter. The fact is it's all connected and it must flow. Same thing goes with banking. There is only one pool of capital, and it's the duty of the bankers to make sure that it's flowing as quickly as possible so that they maintain their profitability, right? So then, Rob, the question becomes, which bank do you want to utilize? Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Well, yeah, as John said, all those transactions that are coming and going in through banks, so you have cash, you need it to buy something, you give it to a vendor or whatever person or a contractor or whatever. They take that, you're at bank A, this is great. You're at bank A, you give it to your contractor goes back to bank A and deposits it. So the same bank is making money on every transaction. Oh, and John, I want to talk on that let's say they're lending it out they're giving you 4% and then they're lending it out at 6%. That's not a 2% spread for the bank. That's 50% because it costs them $4 to make $2. So that's a thing also that I was like eye-opening to me is we just think that that's a little 2% spread for the bank. It's not. That's $4. Something costs them $4, they sell it for $6, they have a $2 profit. That's a good profit. So
Even at a philosophical level, if you zoom out, it's not even their money. So
isn't that
the profit on that just seems all the more, infinite, even if you want to consider it that way. They have $0 and they're making
Yeah.
a profit off of your money.
We enable them to make money because we put all of our money in their banks. So they get free money from us and they just turn a profit by just recycling our money. It kind of blows your mind once you get your head around it. And we just don't even know. We don't think about it.
So once again, I'll go back to the question of which bank do you want to make the most profitable?
Well, if I want to be moving money in and out of a bank, I want it to be my own bank, my own personal banking system that we show people how to do by using a permanent whole life, mutually owned, dividend paying whole life policy. That becomes your banking system so that you're moving money in and out of your own banking system. You get the spread. And I think that's the big thing that light bulb goes off for people is, oh, I can become my own banker. I get to take advantage of that spread. And so powerful concept.
The only limiting factor in that equation is just how much you're willing to put into your banking system. Therefore, being able to take it right back out and borrow against it and expand your system. He'll talk about that in the rest of the book is how you use it depends on how much you put in, and how it accomplishes your banking needs. It depends on how much you put in.
Yep.
All the more reason to understand it, get the education first, and really have a good grasp of it so that you can feel comfortable moving forward with significant high premium, high cash value policies.
Yeah, that's exactly right. When I think about how Nelson in this book, he's going to talk about by creating your own banking system, by becoming your own banker, you're basically starting a business from scratch or a startup bank, right? And so the question is, well, how much capital do you want in that bank to be able to utilize? Whether it be, you could be lending it out to other people, other institutions, or you could be financing your own things, your own needs in life. But that's exactly right. I had a conversation with a client this week and they were thinking like, oh man, well, I could, only fund this thing for a short period of time. And I said, it all depends. Are you going to actually be able to accomplish your goals of becoming your own banker if you'd only paid premium over 3 or 4 years? Nelson says that that's not usually the case. And in fact, most people can't even achieve it in one policy. It requires maybe multiple policies or a system of policies in order to accomplish that.
Yep.
John, you were talking a little bit earlier about velocity of money. I know that's something that you've been digging into lately. Why don't you go ahead and tell the listeners some key facts about velocity of money?
Sure. It's exactly how I related with the storage, where I thought, man, my money is sitting with that bank with an envelope, my name on it, and I'm going to be able to take it out whenever I want. And it doesn't do that. And the banks know that. The banks know that that's an eroding factor, that it's just going to sit. If they were to let it sit, it would just erode. There's taxes, there's inflation, there's all sorts of circumstantial, exterior factors that we can't control, that honestly not even the banks can control to some extent. And so that's why we can learn from what the banks do. They've been doing this for a very long time. They understand the profitability of turning that money, like we've talked about this episode so far. And so, if you want to equate it to water, water just sitting stagnant. If you ever see a little pond, it just grows with algae and just kind of smells bad. And, it's not a good sight or a good smell. So you don't want that to be the same with your money. It's going to erode. I think that's one of the best pictures in my mind, that taxes, inflation, maybe the market, if you have it sitting in a retirement account, all those factors that you can't control, that you can't even turn your money, you can't even control how it flows, will make what you think is going to end up, in a continuous growth, maybe not look like what you actually envision. So, in reality, so controlling that banking function, letting it flow over and over again, just multiplies the profitability of those dollars that you worked really hard to earn. And I'm gonna also circle back to kind of thinking long term. That's going to be ingrained throughout this entire book, throughout our entire podcast, is thinking long term. And we are the Family Banking Show. And so if you're going to set up this bank and you think it's worth it and you understand it, you're not just thinking about the next 3 or 4 years. You're thinking ideally, you're thinking generationally. You're thinking 2, 3, 4 generations down the road. And what better way to set those generations up than to think long term, overcome those 2, 3, 4, 5 years of capitalizing or building your business, building your bank to set up that legacy, to set up that family bank, like we talk about, like our show is about, like our podcast is named after. And so I think that's just really, really important to emphasize that this long term approach is absolutely worth it.
All right, Rob, tell me a little bit about, is it possible for an infinite banking type policy or system of policies to be more profitable than a commercial bank?
I think it could be possible. For one thing, you have the tax advantages of it. You have the lower overhead of it because it's your personal system. I'd say the overhead of all the things a bank requires, to be a bank. You don't have all those expenses. So it's very theoretical that it could. You get a good rate of return on it, and just by default, it's guaranteed. But then you can leverage it, to take advantage of it. So yeah, I would say you totally could have your own banking system, be more profitable than if you were definitely more profitable than if you were storing it in someone else's bank. But if in terms of a banking system, yeah, there's just the overhead of it and the tax advantages of it and the death benefit of it. That it's something we don't talk about, but we'll talk more about. But the death benefit of it is the rate of return on getting a whole life policy and then unfortunately passing away on that death benefit is huge. So that's, yeah, there's so many. In one of our episodes, we'll go through, there's like 16 key points of the advantages of a whole life policy that I think will really be eye-opening for a lot of people.
That's a great point, Rob, including the death benefit. Banks don't get a death benefit from turning your deposits.
Right.
Banks are very profitable. We all know that. And they have, the high rises, they have the skyscrapers, but it's a good added portion of our dollars doing multiple jobs where it's still the whole time we're banking and we're profiting in that way and we're turning our money, giving us a death benefit and protecting our family and ultimately kind of multiplying that wealth for future generations.
Yeah. Right.
Continuing our family bank. I wanted to circle back also again to the first paragraph with Nelson's kind of theory or thought exercise, where he says, if some authoritative power distributed all the money in the world equally among all the people in the world, within 10 years' time, 97% of all the money would be under the control of 3% of the people. Derek, what do you think about that? I know he goes on to kind of qualify that statement. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Nelson's a student of history. And so I think he kind of pulls from some of his past knowledge of what has already occurred in history. I mean, even consider, the founding of the United States as immigrants have moved in, right? What has happened? Yeah, banks started forming organizations that were highly profitable off of war or railroads, whatever, where, yes, a large pool of that capital is being controlled by a very, very small portion of people. Even, as we've talked about before, think of how many large commercial banks there are in the United States. There's maybe a list of 5 or 6 that control a vast amount of the wealth in this country and even worldwide is in the hands of just a few organizations. Relative to the entire world population, that's just astronomical, the power that they have by being able to control other people's money. There was a study that was done, and I can share a link in the show notes of the most profitable businesses in the world. and broken down by their categories. Some of them were banks, some of them were insurance companies, others were trust funds or hedge funds. But the big thing that you'll see there is out of a list of the top 10, about 6 or 7 of them, what they do is they just control people's money. That is the most profitable thing you can do, is control other people's money, or control your own money or your family's money in a system like this that we're talking about, so that no longer are those dollars leaving your personal economy, but it's always coming back to your family banking system. That's the part that really excites me when I think about, can my IBC policy or my family banking system, can it be more profitable than a commercial bank? Well, it's true. We don't have the ability to do fractional reserve lending. That's a huge benefit to the banks. But there's also a compounding dividend that we receive in the whole life insurance policy that banks don't have as much access to dollar for dollar, right? It's no secret that banks are masters at owning life insurance. It's where they store their tier 1, top of the line cash that they need to keep on reserves, is in the form of life insurance, because they recognize how many benefits there are to it. But when you're considering how many dollars they're receiving in interest and how many dollars are going towards life insurance premiums, it's still a small portion. But in our systems, the interest that we are charging ourselves or our family members or whoever above the rate that the insurance company is charging, I call it charging at least retail rate. If we're charging retail and that spread that we're gaining is purchasing additional insurance immediately, and that additional insurance is going to compound on itself, purchasing more and more and more over time, that commercial banks don't really have that as much of a efficiency in that capacity. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just food for thought for our listeners of thinking about, could my system be more profitable? All we can say is, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that's a good, maybe I'll wrap up this week, part 1, becoming your own banker, to kind of tie into what both you, Derek, and John were saying. At the very end, he says basically what you guys just said. This book is all about how to create your own banking system so that you can control 100% of your needs, becoming your own banker. And I think that's a great way to kick off or finish off this part 1 and kick us off into the next segment.
Yeah, next episode, we're going to be talking about, we'll be on pages 12 and 13 about how the infinite banking concept got started. I'm really excited for that episode, but want to thank you guys and thank you to our listeners for sticking with us. If there's anything about this episode that you want to hear more about and would like to reach out to us, feel free to send us an email at thefamilybankingshow@gmail.com or visit our website, The Family Banking Show. Well, guys, until then, we'll see you in the next episode.
All right. See you guys.
Thank you for joining us. If you're interested in a conversation about anything we've discussed, you can find our contact information in the show notes below.
And subscribe, follow, and leave a review to help spread this message and to help families across the country discover the generational blessing of IBC. May God bless you, and we'll see you next time.